my name is Joseph Michael, and let's discuss Trials in the Sky second chapter. It was developed by Falcom and released in March 9th of 2006. And as the name implies, it's the second chapter of the Trials in the Sky story. It's actually part of a larger series known as The Legend of Heroes. And for those who are unaware, it begins with the Sky trilogy. Then it follows with the Crossbow duology, a set of 2 games, then finally concluding in the Code Steel series, a tetralogy of 4 games. And the only reason why I played this game was because I played the first 2 Code Steel series games. And by the time I got to the third one, I did watch summaries of the Sky trilogy and Crossbow arc, but I recognized 2 characters from this trilogy, Tita and Agate, but I couldn't. Even though I recognized them, I couldn't recall the specific details of those characters, and that's what convinced me to go ahead and go back in the series and begin with the Sky trilogy. And I just finished the second chapter last week on a Wednesday. And I gotta say, it was such a great game, such a good experience. The first game does a great job of having a self-contained story. It does end in a huge cliffhanger. I won't state what it is for anyone who hasn't played it or anyone who's planning on playing it. But the sequel essentially picks up what the first one left off. And our main character, Estelle Bright, she is helped with a huge cast of other characters in her attempt to get back Joshua. For those who are playing the first one, you are aware that Joshua and Estelle are both the protagonists of the first game. But in the second game, Estelle was on her own, and she's trying to figure out how to contact and reach Joshua Astray. His last name is Astray. And there's a huge cast with this game. On the journey to help Estelle, there's Chloe, there's Tita, Agate, Squizzard. I'm probably not pronouncing her name correctly, but she was essentially almost like a surrogate mother, kind of, to Estelle. When she was young, or maybe more like a bigger sister than a mother. Who else? I have them written down. Give me a quick second. Zane. And the thing that I love about this game series is that despite having a main character in your party, it does a great job of fleshing out other minor characters as well. Such as Estelle, she is part of a group known as the Bracer Guild, and the whole point of their services is to help people. They remain neutral in terms of politics and war, and their purpose is to help people if they're in danger, they need assistance. They just want to be a positive force within each city that they that they have a branch in. And Estelle, her dad is a part of that. Cassius Bright. And so that's one of the reasons why Estelle wants to be a part of it as well. And the first game, it was all about actually becoming an official bracer. And in this game, she has become a bracer, and she's taking on bracer duties. Like with the first game, this game does start off a little bit slowly, but once the main story comes into play, it becomes a lot more interesting. And as I already stated, this game is actually connected to an overarching bigger series, The Legend of Heroes. If anyone is planning on playing the Code Steel series, I highly do recommend, at the very least, playing the first 2 Sky games if you don't want to play all 3 of the trilogy. But it really does help a lot with getting references and being more emotionally connected to characters. I am playing Code Steel 3. I'm barely in Chapter 1, but already I've seen so many references to the Sky trilogy. And I know for a fact that if I wasn't aware of those references, it would have just completely went over my head, and I would be unaware of those references. I did watch a summary for the Crossbow arc, and unfortunately, although just like at the beginning with Tita and Agate in Code Steel 3, I do recognize some aspects, but I can't recall the specific details. But we're here to discuss Trials in the Sky second chapter. So it is a JRPG, it's a turn-based JRPG, but they do add some extra elements to make it a little bit more exciting compared to other turn-based games. You're actually allowed to move them on the playing field, and they can't reach the enemy in their turn. They'll just get closer to them. You are allowed, of course, to use magic. In this game, it's called arts, and then you have special techniques known as crafts. The game is, I would actually say it's quite a difficult, well, no, not difficult, but just right, the difficulty. You're going to be seeing that game over screen quite often if you don't grind, but it's definitely worth it. The highlight of this series is definitely the story, both in terms of the overarching story and the characters themselves. More than once, I found myself choking up with the second chapter. Um, just because Falcom did such a great job of making these characters feel alive, feel immersive, and you actually do care about them. The way it ends, I won't lie, Cassius Bright, I would consider him to be a bit of a Gary Stu. I won't go more into that just because I don't want to spoil anything. But with that being said, that does not mean that he's not an enjoyable character. He is so fun to see the plans that he has up his sleeves. And you see why he's a road-renowned bracer within this game's world. He's definitely earned up to his reputation because of all the crazy plots and ploys that he has up his sleeve. Although Estelle Bright, she is the main character. Other characters, they do get the spotlight. We find out so much about her crew, her party, especially specifically about two characters. Well, excluding Joshua, of course, but specifically about Chloe and Oliver. We find out more details about them that really opens up the series. And if you played the newer entries, then you realize, oh wow, they've been planning this for quite a while. The main enemy for this game is known as the Society of Ouroboros. They were present in the first game as well, but they were more in the background, manipulating factors and manipulating details to fulfill what they were trying to fulfill their plans, to fulfill their goals. With this game, we're still not sure what exactly it is that they're attempting to do, but their presence is felt a lot more as compared to the first one. And despite the fact that the Society of Ouroboros, they are the main enemy for the other Legend of Heroes series, we do get a conclusive ending to this story for the Sky trilogy. For those of you who are unaware, the first two games continue the story, while the third Sky game, although it does have some concluding details about the main Sky story, it mostly goes more into about the lore and gives us hints about the future of the series. So more about the crossbow duology and the Code Steel tetralogy. But again, with that being said, I want to reinforce the point that this game stands alone. Both this one and its first, and well, no, I shouldn't say that, but its first entry has enough of a conclusive story that if one didn't want to continue with it, they could just end it right there. They want it to. So I'm reiterating that just because I don't want people to think that since this series is part of an overarching plot, that things will not be resolved, that character resolutions won't be concluded, or character arcs there won't be any character growth. That is so not true. Falcom does an amazing job of making sure of keeping that overarching plot in mind, but not having it hinder or impede in the story that the game itself is trying to tell. It goes hand in hand together. They did such an organic job. It's really awesome. And when the story, because there's so many characters, whenever things look bad, there's always someone else who's there to rescue the party. And very rarely does it feel like it's not organic just because the story and the writing, it makes sense for those other characters to be here. They set up the context because there are other bracers. They were already in the area fighting monsters because they were part of the Royal Army. They were protecting the group, and they were protecting the entrance, and now the entrance is good, and they caught up to the main party to assist them. They do such a great job of making you go gasp out loud and wondering, oh my gosh, what's going to happen next? It never feels like a cheap ploy. The only time it does feel kind of cheap, I won't lie, is with Cassius Bright, but it makes sense why he is the way that he is. But we can't ignore the fact that he is essentially a Gary Stu. But he's not one of the major characters. He mostly plays a role in the background. So the fact that he is a Gary Stu doesn't negatively impact the story. At least I don't think that it does. And what I love about this story, like I know I've already stated how there's main characters, and the story does a great job of fleshing out the minors characters too. But even with nobody characters, so again, I won't get into spoilers, but by the time you get to the game's climax, it's at the climax of the story. It doesn't just involve the main party; it literally involves the entire nation, the Kingdom of Liberal, where this game takes place. And it's so fun because when you see the cutscenes, you see what the Royal Army is doing, and they do such a great job of showing that they really do care about the subjects of the kingdom, and they really do have such a strong love for the Queen and for the kingdom itself. It's very awesome. You couldn't help but but scream with them for liberal as they were protecting the subjects away from the what was going on. I don't want to get into too much detail because again, spoilers. But it was so fun seeing them, and they did such a great job with these nobody characters. It's not explicitly stated, Well, you know, a lot of them are going to die. There's one great scene in particular where they're shooting cannons at these group of bad guys, but there's having no effect on them. But does that stop the soldiers? No, the captain takes off his sword and says, "Come on, we need to make sure we protect the people, give them a chance to escape and get to safety for the people, for the queen, for liberal." And they all go charging in, and you know that they're all not going to make it, especially after the cannons having no impact. But you feel for them, and it's very cool. Um, it makes this game's world feel much more alive. And with that being said, we could actually discuss if you take the time. So this game took me about 40 hours to complete, and I'm not going to lie. I did do most of the side quests, but towards the end, I did start skipping them. But I wasn't speaking to every NPC. And you might be wondering, well, what does that matter? Well, with the Legend of Heroes, with every entry, be it the Sky Trilogy, Crossbow, Code Steel, the NPCs, they actually have minor stories of their own. They actually go through character arcs of their own. And if you take the time to talk to them as you progress in the main story, you get you progress further in these minor stories as well. And it's actually, again, it makes the world feel much more alive. So many characters that you saw in the first game, they make reappearances in the second game in logical places because it made sense of what they were doing in the first game. It's so awesome. It's so great. This is my cat. Please excuse her. She's just excited because I fed her breakfast. But yeah, The Legend of Heroes. Legend of Heroes, Trials in the Sky, second chapter. I highly recommend it. Obviously, if you haven't played the first one, I do recommend you play the first one before the second chapter because it literally does pick up on the cliffhanger. All the characters are great. You more than likely will be choking up. Don't be surprised if you shed a couple tears here and there. That's just how good the story is. Not even good, that's just how great this story is. Actually, once I'm done with this video, I'm going to go back and get into Code Steel 3 and checking out all those other references and being excited when they do pop up. And it's not just for fan service too. The great part about it all is that it just, again, it fleshes out the world and makes this, so it takes place in a continent known as Emuria, and it makes Emuria feel, it makes it feel real. It makes it feel like it's a real nation with neighboring countries next to them, and they're all dealing with having to work with one another without falling into war or falling into chaos. So yeah, again, I do recommend it. If anyone wants to discuss this game, please do. I have played the first two. I haven't played the third one in the series. I did watch a summary of it though, and summaries of Crossbell. I have my fingers crossed that the Sky Trilogy in Japan gets ported over to the West. They actually do have. So it originally came out on PSP and PC. But the series is so popular in Japan that it got remastered for the PS3, and the Crossbell series actually just recently got remastered for the PS4. It's doing well enough so far in the West that I'm hoping the success will convince Falcom to go ahead and go ahead and bring over English translations of the Sky Trilogy and the Crossbell arc. Even though I just beat the first two games in the Sky Trilogy within the past 2 to 3 months, I am so up to go back into it, especially on my PS4. Any excuse to get back into a great story like that, don't mind if I do. And plus, I'll more than likely take my time with it this time. I'll do more of the side quests, talk to more of the NPCs, and the great thing about this series is that it's a lot like The Witcher 3. They're not just side quests to waste your time. They're they're there because they actually add something to the world. So yeah, if you guys want to discuss, send me a private message, go ahead and make a response video, or let me know down in the comments below. I hope that we will have great discussions, great conversations, and take care, everyone. Let's be positive like Estelle Bright. Let's be as bright as she is.